In the beginning, the world was this formless wasteland, chaos. And God spoke, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God divided the sky and the earth from the sea, and made the plants and the animals. But the greatest of all his creatures was man. In fact, he was so good, he was made in the image and likeness of the divine. I'm sure that made Adam feel pretty happy to know he was so special. I mean, think about it. If you were in a classroom, and there is the teacher, and points over all of the ones right there in front of her, and says, "You are all good," but then turns to this one and says, "You are very good." That's exactly what God did for Adam. He looked all around creation and said, "It is good." But you, Adam, you are very good. Now, at first, great. So Adam feels good about himself. But there's a problem. A dilemma happens to Adam right away. He finds that he is unique. And unique is a scary word. It means there's nobody like him. He's all alone. And he looks around at the magnificence of paradise and says, "Is that it?" And God says, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, it's all beautiful, but nobody's like me. There's no one here for me to share paradise with." And God hears the cry of his heart and casts a deep sleep upon him and removes from his side a rib, and from the rib forms the first woman, Eve. And Adam wakes up the next morning and turns to see in his midst the most beautiful creature he had ever seen. Finally, flesh of my flesh, bone of my bone, equal to me, I have a companion. I have someone with whom I can share paradise. And now he is complete. For the first time, we see a family, a marriage, a friendship, a community. So what happened? I mean, we started off on the right foot. We have this beautiful paradise and this beautiful appreciation and love for one another, this perfect little family. That doesn't seem like the world we know. Well, Genesis has an answer to that too. It calls it original sin. Adam and Eve, they distrusted God. And God gave them just one rule, just one. And they broke it. And as a result, they turn against each other. And everything in life becomes more burdensome. And it just gets worse from there. Cain and Abel, the Tower of Babel, Noah. To our modern day, where all around us we see all kinds of problems. It's almost as if we're taking the order that God had made and trying to go back to the chaos from whence we had come. You know, maybe Adam and Eve would have been a little bit more careful about their choices if they knew how far-reaching and powerful sin is. You see, the problem is they had no experience. They never had a temptation before. They never saw a sin before. They were pretty naive about it. And if they really knew how many people would be affected, perhaps they would have been more careful. But it's true about you and me too. We have a lifetime of experience of what sin is and what effect it has on the world. And yet we can be pretty naive. We have to realize that every sin is communal. It affects everyone else, whether you know it or not. There's no such thing as a private sin, a personal sin. Think about it. If a man stays home and he's by himself and he drinks too much, he might say to himself, "I'm not hurting anybody. It's just my sin." But then the next morning, when he's not feeling all that good, when he's not at his best, what do you think his attitude is going to be when the waitress brings the wrong meal to him? Or when his employees are not living up to his expectations? Do you really think that first sin will have no effect on the way he treats the world? Or the woman who watches a television program that teaches all the wrong things. That true happiness is found in being more selfish, more dominating, more crude and rude. Now you're going to tell me that that has no effect on the way she treats her husband, to whom she knows all of his faults? Or the way she gives advice to her friends? Or those inner feelings when her children are being demanding? Those sins have this ripple effect to everyone. There's no such thing as a personal, private sin. But let's not get discouraged here. It is not unique to sin that there is such outreaching and powerful effects to the community. It is also true of virtue, in particular of love. Love is so powerful. It can move mountains. It can reshape the world. As a matter of fact, love with a capital L created the world in the first place. We have to put a lot of trust in that, because we don't see a lot of trust. You know what we see? We see the old world mentality, a way of thinking as if, what we need to do is fight fire with fire, an eye for an eye mentality. And that is the surest way to get burned, or the surest way to create global blindness. We have to be careful about that. That way of thinking in which we dominate one another, sin for sin, that's not the way the Scriptures are teaching us to live. I suppose that's the mentality of a terrorist. You better do what I tell you. You better not insult me. You better not do evil to me. Because if you do, I will respond with a worse evil. I will let loose my wrath. Whoa. That is not Christ. Christ is not a terrorist. He does not use evil to combat evil. Christ uses love to show us a better way. And Jesus is very clear. There's a place to start. You have to start with your family. You have to start with forgiving. Forgiveness is an ultimate sign of humility and love. It is an attempt not to push people away, but to bring them close. Not to create more divisions or somehow fix the divisions in the world by pushing them even further away from your love. When you forgive, you're saying, you know what? These are wounds that need to heal. The sinfulness in the world it's like a wound, but we keep picking at it. We think this action is going to somehow make it get better. Leave it alone. Stop it. Forgiveness. It's the only way that'll work. Don't try to figure out who's wrong, who's the culprit, who's making you unhappy. Because I tell you what, even if you figured it out, it's not going to fix anything. It doesn't work that way. C.S. Lewis wrote a book called The Great Divorce. And in The Great Divorce, it was about dying. And everybody, when they die, they get to go to the same place. And when you're in this place, you get to make your own house. Any kind of house you want. You can dream it up. And you get to live anywhere you want. Most people chose to live far away from everyone else. Because they found when they had neighbors, especially family members, they didn't like them very much. Better to move far away. And they kept moving away and moving away and moving away. In fact, Napoleon lived on that star several million light years away because he was so unforgiving and intolerant of anyone else. But the Christians, they built cities and drew closer together and made communities. Now it would seem if you could invent any house you want, everybody should be happy. But most people found that they were not because they lived in isolation. But the Christians had found a new way of living. It isn't quite paradise until you're together. A lesson given to us by Adam himself. Apparently, this is the way God designed us. He designed us to come closer together, to create unity and peace, to love and respect. And the only way we can do that is not by going out and finding that perfect person, but to forgive the imperfect people around us and start with our families. Draw them close, not further away. If it is true happiness you are looking for, then Christ has the solution. Do not fight sin with sin. Do not create division upon division. Forgive, reconcile, bring close, and the healing offered by Christ will be yours.